If you're a team leader in a busy office, you can implement many ways to motivate your team, gauge their reaction, look into their eyes, see their activity. Now you may have found that your business life has completely changed. Your team are working remotely. Your former methods of management and motivation don't seem appropriate, and your boss may have an even higher expectation of you. As a remote team leader, what are the top skills you need to improve upon? Well, who to better ask than my Remote Leadership Institute friend, Wayne Turmel, who's at home now in Las Vegas. Wayne, thanks for letting me revisit you.
Welcome. I wish you were really visiting. It's Las Vegas.
But be a time. I don't think it was exaggerating in my opening piece when I said that many team leaders are suddenly struggling to manage the remote leader challenge. So what are the top 3 or 4 skills that they could concentrate on quickly improving?
Yeah, I think if we're thinking about what those skills are, I'm advisedly cautious about saying listening skills, because it's not just listening. It's picking up hints. It's being able to read an email and saying, there may be something here that needs addressing. I guess building your radar is the easiest way to say it, is the first skill. But in order to do that, I think you're going to be assisted by a couple of other things. One is you need to get technically proficient. You don't need to be the head nerd. You don't need to be the power user of whatever tools your team is using. And that said, you need to identify what tools are we using. Are we using the right tools in the right way? And I think that is important, because a lot of leaders resist learning technology because it's going to somehow expose them as not being all powerful. And you need to get over that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the second thing. The third skill that leaders need to work on, and this sounds counterintuitive, but it's just so true, is managing your time and your expectations on yourself. One of the things that we are learning over the last few months of COVID-inspired craziness is that good leaders are servant leaders, and we tend to take on the responsibility. And so when somebody needs to be up at 4 a.m. for that call with Singapore, well, I'll do it, because I don't want to inflict that on somebody else. And, you know, if I need to be up first thing in the morning for New York and up late at night for Hong Kong, that's just the way it's got to be. And what we're learning is that the managers who care the most and are trying to spare their teams as much discomfort as possible are burning themselves out.
Yeah, not good. So how easy do you think, in your experience, these new skills are to learn and to be good at? Can they be achieved quickly, or are the gradual improvements the better way? You know, like weight loss, 1 or 2 pounds a week, which I'm still trying to do.
Yeah, well, and you see how well that's working for all of us, man. I think that we are overestimating the scale of skill building that needs to happen. I think that we are talking incremental changes as opposed to major orders of change. In the long distance leader, we keep harping back to the first rule, which is think leadership first, location second. And if you, let's take how you coach your employees as an example. If you are comfortable that in a one-on-one, in-person environment, you are capable of doing a good job coaching, it's not that much of a stretch to adjust to doing it via webcam or some other kind of technology. If you have no clue how to coach people, that's going to be a much higher and steeper learning curve.
Yeah.
So I think what we're talking about is a degree of change for most of us, and not a massive order of change. And I think my experience has been, once leaders kind of stop and quit paddling as fast as they can, and they just think about, oh yeah, this is not that different, then they're able to make the adjustments. I mean, there are things we need to learn, technology, and perhaps we need to up our writing skills, and we need to do some of those things. But again, those are degrees of change, not orders of change for most of us.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. What will happen though if team leaders don't tackle these key areas you've mentioned? I know an obvious one may be their own job at risk, but what others from a company perspective?
Well, it's funny. One of the things that people often don't associate with remote work is turnover, because all the initial studies about people who work remotely, and you mentioned it yourself, a third of people are like, oh, I'm never going back to the office. This is great. And so we treat remote work as a perk. And of course, if you give people perks, they're happy and they stick around. But also, if you know anything about perks, you know that after about 6 months, that's now the norm, and people don't look at it as a perk. And turnover among remote employees goes up if they are disengaged. And the reason is there's no barrier to leaving my job. If I drive into central London every day, or I have to take the tube, my life is built around my routine, and I have social relationships with the people I work with. And if I take a job in another part of the city, that might be an extra 25 minutes commute. In order to do that, if I'm working remotely, literally the only thing that changes in my life is the login password to the new network. There are no barriers to me leaving my current job. If I don't like the company and I don't like the people I'm working with and I haven't established relationships, I'll just go to the next job. And that turnover, that disengagement leading to turnover, is going to be a huge issue for organizations as they go increasingly virtual.
Interesting. Yes, very. What are the top 3 or 4 mistakes that businesses are currently making about implementing remote working and remote management?
Boy, the top 3 or 4 mistakes. I think that there are a couple of obvious ones and perhaps one that is less obvious. I think the obvious ones are expecting people to just completely disregard their personal experiences from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever the time is, because they're at work and they should jolly well be at work. Well, if you are mistaking activity for productivity, that's going to be a problem in a world where, 25% of your workforce are women with children at home. And there are people struggling for resources and they don't have a door. So not taking their personal circumstances into account. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't say, hey, we need people to respond, but there are ways to do that, and there are ways to schedule, and there are things that you can work out. So I think that's the first mistake that organizations are likely to make. And that's usually in service of the bean counters, who are, how do we know that people are working? That's a much larger issue of leadership. I think a second one that is fairly obvious is not setting expectations in the first place. Just kind of assuming that people know their job and they'll figure it out, and this is how we're going to communicate as a team, and assuming that everybody has the same definition of as soon as possible, for example, or choosing the right tool for the job. We all have that friend who could be living on Mars because we only communicate through email, because that's their preferred way to operate. Mm-hmm. And if there aren't explicit, mindful discussions and expectations around some things, teams can disintegrate very quickly. I think I said that there was kind of a less obvious one. And this one, I think, is what we're finding with our clients is a lot of them are not putting HR systems and succession planning and career management systems in place, or assuming that what worked in the office will work here. But one of the things, for example, is that a lot of organizations are still treating working from home as a perk. And if you choose that perk, you are taking yourself off the career track. Now, that's changed radically in the last couple of months. When the CEO finds herself working from home, all of a sudden the world is a very different place. But the HR systems haven't done that. So I'm working really hard. I want a promotion. But in order to get that next job, I have to be able to go into the office every day. A lot of organizations kind of have that expectation, and right now they're examining that and saying, is that necessarily true? But without that career track, without that succession planning, without those systems in place, you're going to have a lot of people hitting the wall and essentially voting with their feet and saying, if you're not going to promote me, I'll go find somebody who will. And that's a symptom. That's a symptom, Malcolm, of right now we're just trying to get through right now, and we're not thinking about the long-term implications.
Yeah. It's fascinating what you're saying there, and it bears witness to the interviews I've been doing with workplace advisors. People who are looking on behalf of CEOs. Do we need those offices, and so on? Yeah,
I tell you what, as a career track, if your children are looking at commercial real estate, I would beg them to reconsider.
Yes. Yeah. Look, since I first met you, and I've done my research following you and everything, I've been totally impressed about the Remote Leadership Institute and what you deliver for people. So how can you practically help team leaders become proficient in remotely managing and motivating their teams?
Well, thank you for those kind words. We think we're pretty good at what we do. And it's funny because we've been doing it for a while. If you look on LinkedIn, suddenly everybody is an expert on virtual work. But this has been our bread and butter for a long time. And what that means is we have been able to identify those things that maybe are not brand new skills, but are things that need to be improved. And so the majority of what we do are skill building courses which are designed to augment where you are, as opposed to treating this as a brand new phenomenon. Coaching your employees is a critical part of your job. Coaching at a distance requires a couple of adjustments. And that's really what we do. We augment people's leadership journey already and kind of say, okay, and when working remotely, these are the things that are different or need to be adjusted. And so whether it's an individual program that we do for a client, we're working with somebody right now who just wants their managers to be able to breathe and understand why this is so strange, right? And so how to create and manage remote teams is a really good solution for that, because once they understand these are the dynamics, they're already high level of skills. This is a very good organization, can then kick in and people can make the adjustment. If they need help making the adjustment, running virtual meetings or coaching their remote employees to be more productive, we've got stuff that can help there too, whether it's an entire series or individual classes. And of course, if people visit remoteleadershipinstitute.com, there's a ton of free stuff in terms of blog posts, resources, things like that. So we aim to be kind of a central place for people to get their hands around it.
Excellent. Wayne Turmel of the Remote Leadership Institute, thanks for this deeper dive interview. I think you've just given many team leaders the solution they seek.
I hope so, man. At the very least, as all good gurus, the goal is to get them asking the right questions. And hopefully we have accomplished that. Thank you, man.